the opportunity to be here. So I joined the industry, the pharma industry, a number of years ago now. I actually joined because I'm trained as a scientist, as a pharmacist, but in joining the industry, I really found the opportunity to combine that science with sort of art, and went down a much more business-oriented path. And that path has taken me, fortunately, sort of all over the world in different roles, both P&L leading, as well as marketing leadership roles, until, coming back to New Jersey, where we are based now, where our global headquarters is based. And I lead an organization that's really focused on defining the next chapter of marketing leadership at Merck, what that means, and how we get there.
Yeah, and I know when we were speaking last week, you had mentioned you spent, most of your career at Merck. I know, under another name at different points. But can you tell us about, the evolution of your role over the last, I think, 8 years at Merck?
So, I've been fortunate to be part of an organization that really does provide lots of opportunities for growth and development, particularly if you have the sort of personal opportunity to be able to take those steps and to be able to travel. And I mean, not everyone is mobile, but I've sort of had the privilege of taking assignments in Europe, in Asia, in London, and here in New Jersey, and those assignments have really spanned a whole breadth of various types of marketing and general management roles. And I think the benefit of that is, not only are you getting sort of functional experiences and a breadth of functional experiences, but also being thrown into ambiguous situations, new countries, new businesses that you're not familiar with, brings a tremendous amount of not only professional but also, honestly, personal growth, as well as the opportunity for the family to live in different countries and cultures, and really get a sense of kind of how we are all connected as global citizens. So it's been never a dull moment in the last few years, and I've been very fortunate to have enjoyed almost every minute.
That's great. I know with one of my previous roles, I was able to travel to India and learn so much about the culture there. Were there any, takeaways or, any type of business acumen that you learned along the way that you would want to share with us?
I think so. From a business point of view, the value of being thrown into different types of situations is that I think your critical thinking skills develop quickly over time. You start to see patterns, you start to learn how to approach ambiguous situations, break them down over time. So there's a definite benefit from a business acumen point of view. There's clearly a benefit from a cultural and emotional intelligence kind of acumen perspective as well, to be able to understand how to lead in different cultures and contexts. But also, I think there's an appreciation, and particularly for marketers, where we serve audiences that are very heterogeneous, and particularly for those of us in global marketing roles who are really serving the world. It's difficult to do that and be effective if you really haven't lived some of those experiences, or got close to some of the experiences that our customers have, and really developed an appreciation for how varied our audiences can be. So I think for all those reasons, I would encourage anyone who has the opportunity to travel and to work in different places and take on as much breadth as possible.
Yeah, and I think so much today, we're thrown into roles, and, that role will get expanded quickly into territories that, we might not be as familiar with. So being able to deal with that ambiguity and, kind of navigate, getting to know teams, or like who you have to pull into a project or something like that. I think that type of travel can really help with you feeling more comfortable introducing yourself and getting to know broader teams. So let's focus on your current role. What is the main focus of your current role that you're in now?
So the main focus, Laurie, is so our industry, as many industries are, is very much in, it's in a lot of change. There's a lot of change happening in the healthcare ecosystem more broadly, and our industry obviously has to be not only responding to that, but actually, getting ahead of it. So the purpose for the organization that I lead is really to define what a great marketing team or commercial team would look like in the future, in the near future, what the role of the leader is, what a team composition is, what the capabilities are, but then also more importantly is to actually start to install some of those capabilities. And some of those, we've been on a journey to install over the last few years already. This is sort of an evolution of that. Areas like agile ways of working, a data first mindset, really ensuring that our marketing is relevant, in terms of channel and context and timing for customers. All of those pieces are areas we've been building on in the last few years, but now we kind of just want to accelerate it and really power it and make it very clear that this is what the future of marketing is at Merck, so that people can get a sense of how to build their career journeys towards that.
Yeah, so I heard a lot of things there, agility, data driven. What does that leader look like? Like, how do you define that at Merck, that exceptional leader?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, and I would reflect a little bit on what you said as we were coming into this question on the ability to manage change. I think leadership behaviors are more important than skills for the most part, right? So I think the leader needs to be able to understand, have the business acumen to understand, what does my market look like? What is all the complexity within it, all the players, and to be able to create a vision as to where we're going to go and how we're going to be successful in that market. But in order to do that, no one leader is going to have all of the skills needed, right? So you're just not going to get all of that in one package. So we really are encouraging the development of sort of T-shaped leaders who have the leadership capability, but then know where the blind spots are, know where the needs are, to realize a marketing plan, and then assemble the team around that, and then leads the team around that. So the leadership piece is really important. And as you said a few moments ago, the ability to navigate, quickly, to pivot quickly, to be comfortable when in ambiguity, are very important leader behaviors to be able to manage that complexity.
Yeah. So I know when we spoke last week, I was really intrigued about the way that you kind of simplified the marketing models, because I think that's such an important point. I think, now that we're trying to, thinking about omni-channel marketing, we have to reach all these different people across all these different channels. And sometimes I think we overcomplicate things. And so I loved what you were telling me about how you simplified the models at Merck. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, we've gone to a place of, I think, quite radically simplifying our marketing model. From an industry point of view and beyond the industry, I think when you look like 5-10 years ago at some of the marketing frameworks, they took a very prescriptive approach to how we think about marketing, almost like a recipe book of, this is how we size our market, this is how we create segments, this is how we make decisions about the leverage points, and so on and so forth. And what we find is that that's really not fit for purpose for today's environment, because first of all, an environment in an ecosystem is highly variable from not just country to country, but even within my town's healthcare system versus another healthcare system. So the teams on the ground need to be able to think critically about where the opportunities are and respond very fast and be empowered to do that. And people can't be empowered to do that if they're way down in sort of 100 pages of templates as to how to think about marketing. So we're focused more on asking really good questions. We've broken our framework into a very simple questions-based approach. We focused on bringing teams together to answer those questions, so that you're getting the collaboration across silos, and then you're creating a one-team mission across the silos, so that you can go out and actually go after the areas that the team has agreed upon.
And I know, with healthcare and pharma, especially, you have so many different personas that you're trying to reach. Can you talk a little bit about, the customer groups that you're focused on?
Yeah, there's been a really big shift in the last, again, 5-10 years, where, when you watch some of those movies about pharmaceutical marketing from the past, it was really sort of very focused on Salesforce and kind of very simple product messaging. But now we're operating in a very dynamic and extremely complicated healthcare ecosystem where the decisions that are made about what treatments are available, what treatments are used, is a complicated decision, much more like a B2B sort of model. And so we have to be able to understand those audiences and address them. And that includes, payers, insurers, government, policymakers, as well as prescribers, and then as well as, of course, patients, who increasingly the consumer or the patient has a much more greater stake in the decision and is much more informed with personal data, right? So we're all using wearables and so on now. So I think it's just a very different landscape, and it calls for teams who can kind of cope with that degree of complexity, break it down, make decisions, and ultimately be informed by what the customer needs, and whether we're serving customers appropriately is really the determinant of whether we're successful or not.
I know, you've mentioned change management, and I know you're now in, a industry that's highly regulated. There's tons of change happening, and then you throw COVID on top of that, and it, can be quite a lot to focus on. How do you help to break down those silos for your team, or to really, make sure that everyone's kind of aligning under the same message?
So change, I think leading change is hard in small or large organizations. In large, fragmented, worldwide organizations, it really is hard. I think it starts with why. So it starts with a common understanding of, what it is we're trying to accomplish. And I think the piece that is so important is really bringing people into the journey to kind of co-create the future. The more engagement that there can be, not only from a sort of hierarchically senior leader level, but also from grassroots. The more engagement there can be, the better outcome, the better product there's going to be from change. So I think engagement is really important. And then I also think the piece where we sometimes stop too soon is we create the vision, we go on the change mission, and then we sort of think, okay, we've launched the initiative and we're done. When actually change will usually take, years to sort of embed. It'll take 2 years, 3 years. And in that time of embedding it, we need to sustain the energy, and we need to sustain the communication, the appropriateness, the engagement, and keep going, because it won't change. Meaningful change won't happen overnight. So I think sometimes we just stop too early.
Yeah, it definitely takes time to get it through. So we have a question from the audience that I wanted to pause for. So the question is, has COVID impacted the consumers' thoughts on pharma industries, or are consumers buying more?
So I think what COVID has done is it has, and this is borne out in the data, it has certainly raised, I think, the consciousness of people as to the merits of science and the merits of innovation. So we, as an industry, I think, have risen to the occasion for the most part. So you see kind of collaboration across our industry that has never happened before. So, for example, just last week, it was announced that Merck, which is the company that I'm at, is partnering with J&J to produce J&J's vaccine so that there's more availability of supply for the masses. These types of collaborations are pretty much unprecedented. So I think it's a combination of the industry has risen to the occasion, And the world has developed an appreciation for the importance of science, innovation, and also, frankly, vaccination that has, hopefully will be helpful longer term. Because while, I think none of us would have wanted to be in this situation with sort of lack of readiness that there has been, I think a silver lining is that, there is this recognition that this is important, and hopefully we'll be more prepared for future, if there are future events like this one.
Hopefully not.
For sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to shift gears a little and talk about professional growth, because I know a lot of folks in the call maybe don't have as much experience in this field as you do. So what opportunities for women nowadays in the marketing space kind of excite you about our industry, and maybe not specifically just to pharma marketing, but in general?
So I think it's an interesting question. There's a school of thought that women have particular strengths around bringing teams together, collaboration, leading diverse teams, and I think that's true. I mean, at least that's been my experience of working with female leaders, and that those skills, those types of skills are incredibly important. The skills that say that I am an orchestrator of a team, that's really what's important, because there are so many aspects to marketing now, data science, everything from data science to human storytelling, huge vast spectrums of the kinds of skills that you need within a team. So then you need great leaders to be able to lead those teams, and I think that's a particular strength of female leaders. On the other hand, I would also say that from a technology perspective, I think we would all like to see more representation, more female representation in technology, and I think that's going to be so important to ensure that the tech industry becomes more diverse, so that that there's representation and good decisions made in these incredibly important parts of our world now, that are really influencing society. So that's more of a hope that we see, a greater number of women entering that. I know, I've got a daughter who is turning 3 next month. I know I will be encouraging her to, to be very engaged with STEM subjects as she's growing up, for that reason.
Yeah, I think I mentioned to you last week, my niece is going into informatics at university, and I'm so excited for her, because I feel like that's such a great opportunity for women, especially in data-driven marketing like we're in now, where it's so important to understand and be able to see those insights clearly and make decisions off of them. So I think that's such a great point. So is there anyone, any particular mentors or anyone, that you kind of ran into along the course of your career that really helped guide you, that you want to recognize?
Well, I think the list is probably too long to name everyone, but I think along the way, there have been so many people who've helped me personally, either directly or indirectly. I think very early in my career, when I was at Shearing Plough, which was later merged with Merck, the president of the business at the time was Carrie Cox, who was just an instrumental kind of role model, because as I was really entering just the first few years of my career, I would look at her running the business, and that was a very important inspiration for me. And then there are so many others who are closer, in terms of being direct managers or mentors, supporters along the way. And I would also say, there are, I suppose the nature of mentoring is changing. At least for me, it's changing, where I continue to have mentors who are more experienced than I am, but now I also have mentors who are less experienced than I am in terms of years of work, but who are much more skilled than I am in terms of frankly digital capabilities, digital native, generation from a generational point of view. And I really do rely on those conversations to help me learn, and to ensure that, that I am keeping pace with, not only from a marketing point of view, from a skills perspective, but also from from an organizational leadership point of view, staying in touch with what our people are looking for, and how we continue to develop our employer brand.
Yeah, and I think they touched on this on the last segment as well, but I think that's such an important point, because there's so much we can learn from the younger generations, new tactics or ideas or ways of thinking about things that, maybe we haven't before. So I love that. We did get another question in. Do you have any recommended books or podcasts that have helped you with personal development over the years?
Yeah, I'm a big reader. So at the moment, I would say the last 12 months, I've become obsessed with Brene Brown, I think, like many people, but I turn to Brene Brown podcasts if I have a bad day. And I think she has just so much wisdom to offer that is directly applicable to anyone who's leading at any level, in terms of how to consider the context. So for me, right now, she's my go-to. I'm just looking at my desk and at some of the books that I'm reading right now. One of them is by Gary Hamel, who's an innovation leader out of London Business School, and he's doing some really interesting work. He's been doing very interesting work on how to democratize innovation, that I think really represents the future of work, and how we create less bureaucratic systems and more networks of innovation. So that's another area of interest that's quite current. Yeah, the other person who I think is incredible is Amy Edmondson out of Harvard, who's done a lot of work on psychological safety and how to lead teams with that focus. So yeah, just a few.
Is there anything from, this year of kind of working remotely and not being able to be face to face with our teams, tied to kind of that last point? Is there anything that you learned over this last year that helped you kind of, lead your teams through this unusual situation that we're in?
So I think there's no silver bullet. I haven't spoken to anyone who's discovered the silver bullet as to how to lead virtually. It's a balance, because in a way, in a virtual environment, we need to over communicate, and we need to be, but then on the other hand, everyone is exhausted from, being on screen. So it's a very fine line of what is the right balance of communication, knowing that people want to be part of community, but yet have a completely full schedule and don't need more commitments. So we've been doing our best to get a lot of feedback, as much feedback as possible from the organization, to ensure that we're getting the right balance, and then doing some of the things that I think are not novel either, but are helpful, like taking time out for virtual coffees, and really trying to create some space in the day to just to chat about life, and not always work.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know we were, my team is thinking, there's some of us that haven't even met in person, because some of us started over the last year. So that's a really unusual situation to be in as well. So I want to kind of reflect back too on, early in your career. Is there anything that you would go back and tell yourself as you were starting out, that you today that you didn't then?
Yeah, I think the big one for me is, looking back at sort of just the level of sort of striving early on, is that, that advice around being yourself is really true. The more I have found as I've become older, the more myself that I really am, then the more effective I have become. And I think it's because when you bring your full self into the picture, people see that immediately. So there's really the environment for building trust, and trust is the beginning of great relationships, great collaboration, and great outcomes at work. So if anything, I would just say, relax. I would probably tell myself to just relax a little, and just be yourself.
That's great advice. What about, kind of shifting back to pharma marketing, are there any new tactics or learnings that you think could be executed by other pharma marketers broadly that you would recommend?
I think that, many of us in the industry, I think, most industries are still going through a journey to become, to continually pursue more and more sophisticated digital engagement strategies. In our industry, one of the constraints is, and rightly so, right, it's a very regulated industry. So there are constraints around what we can and can't do. But I do think that some of the innovation that we've been leading in social media has been very important from the point of view of being available to connect to patients and to customers within the channels where they are. So we will continue, as many of our peers will, on that journey to ensure that we're staying relevant and really bringing more and more sort of data into our decision making, more automation into our processes, and also rolling out some of the innovation we've done around next best engagement, next best experience, scaling those types of programs around the world.
What does that engagement look? You mentioned the social media groups. What does that engagement look like?
In terms of the social,
is it with patient
media,
groups, or what does that look like? Are you creating groups for patients under the Merck umbrella?
Oh, I see. Yeah. Well, from a social media perspective, we have activities that sort of span the gamut. We've done a lot of work in cancer, partnering with World Cancer Day, for example. So it's highly variable, I would say, depending on the therapy area that you look at.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's see. I did want to dig into something you said earlier too, kind of stepping back, but you had talked about, the silos within your organization that can kind of prevent that effective collaboration. Are there any, stories you can tell about yourself or team members about a success that they had in kind of navigating through a silo that you're experiencing?
So I think as it relates to silos, it's all about building collaboration and finding common ground. One of the reasons that silos can be hard to deal with is when teams are incentivized against opposite objectives, obviously. So and while that might sound odd for an organization, it's not that unusual. So, for example, an R&D group might be incentivized to get a regulatory file, and a marketing team might want to launch faster than that. So it's quite common that we have goals that are not necessarily aligned. So in those cases, I think the best stories have been around places where we find common ground, where we have early and often conversations, and then really build trusting relationships that get to those objectives. But the relationships have to be founded on trust. The lines of communication have to be open, and there has to be, I think, transparent conversations about goals to really move out of some of those challenging siloed situations.
Yeah, I know that's such a important point too, because I know we in my role, like we span across, we work with sales as well as product, and there'll be very different goals, and sales will be anxious to roll something out, where product, we want to make sure that we have the solution right and it's ready to go. So it is very important to think, yes, you're focused on your goals, but every other team has theirs as well. We have another question from the audience. What do you do internally to expand the knowledge and understanding of the company's activities and goals?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's deceptively it sounds deceptively easy, right? But it's not. So I really like that question. So within a large organization, communication is everything, but it's also tough. So I think so if I maybe just pick a few examples, we think about capabilities like, let's say, experimentation. We're building experimentation into our marketing programs right now. You basically, you've got to come at it with multiple prongs. So you'll come at it with like a kind of top-down communications prong. You will build like grassroots communities of practice. That's one of the areas that we find to be really effective, where we're building a network of communities in different regions who are focused on a specific topic and sharing live some of those ways of working. And we've done that also very effectively recently in like Microsoft Teams channels as well, to kind of go from a more static to a more dynamic conversation about how teams are working and what we're learning. And then, of course, there's I suppose the third pillar, which is really around, more formal learning and development programs. But it is hard. And I think the trick is, in most communication, is just to pick a few areas of focus, because the most challenging environment is one where we have launching, one initiative after another. We need to pick a few things, focus there, and then go all in on the communication there if we want to really have any chance to impact outcomes.
What does that team? I know you mentioned Teams. We use Teams. We just switched over ourselves. Do you have kind of, have you set up kind of groups, and then you just kind of share information? I know you talked about it being, less of a scheduled type interaction. But what types of things are, I don't know how much you can share, but what types of things are you sharing within those channels?
So what we try to do are, and this has been a more recent effort, which I think has been working really well, is to create cohorts who are kind of looking at common business problems. And so then within the channels, you can really see real time, using, like, we use Mural, for example, to plan our work and to create those experimentation approaches. You can see that then, and teams can see each other's work and comment on it. And then participate in generating the learning around the work. So I really like that, because I think it's a great complement to some of the sort of one-way push sort of communication. And because we can't do, like we would have done live workshops and so on, and a few years ago, and people are, I think, a little fatigued with lots of virtual workshops. So I think this sort of approach can create not only a great place to learn, but also that sense of belonging, to a community of like-minded colleagues.
Yeah, and I think a safe space to share information and share ideas before maybe you bring it to a broader group. I know we have some of those separated out by vertical, and but I think there's probably other ways to do that as well. Are there any pharma publications or places where you gather, good learnings that you've been able to take to your team?
So frankly speaking, we don't tend to look at pharma as it relates to marketing, because that's not necessarily where the best marketing is happening. Mm-hmm. I think as an industry, we're a little bit behind some other industries in adopting marketing innovation. So, aside from, really, I think it's incredibly important to reference dynamics, trends within healthcare, what the trends are, who the customers are, what digital health looks like. That's very important if we want to really be creating marketing strategies that are relevant. But the actual marketing approaches themselves are, I think, better sourced from other industries, and that's where we turn to, looking at other industries for inspiration.
Do you think that's mainly like because of the regulations, or is it because there's such, a varied kind of customer group or, personas that you're marketing to?
I think it's a combination of factors. I believe that our industry hasn't been forced to change until recently, right? So, as they say, necessity is the motherhood of invention, and I think for most of us last year in particular was, it really was an opportunity to say, how are we sure that we're ready? So when our Salesforce channels are not, are going to be removed, at least in the physical sense, from our customers, then we've got to look at our digital engagement channels even more seriously. So I think it's partly because we haven't really had to do that at scale yet, but certainly we're now very much on that journey. And then the other piece, as you said, is just the nature of the business model is quite specific to the industry we're in.
Yeah, I know we joked last week about, kind of what it looked like 10 years ago when you had, sales reps going and, dropping off samples in the doctor's office, and things look very, very different today, with the shrinking sales force and then all the different, decision makers within pharma as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. I was just kind of looking through the questions here. Any kind of final points that you wanted to share with the group about, kind of your career journey and, things that you would want to share with the rest of the audience?
I suppose, I'm not sure there's anything in particular. I mean, I suppose I would say, at least for me, getting breadth of experience in a career can be really helpful, in terms of just being able to think broadly about problems and opportunities, and ultimately to lead. I think you hit on it somewhere in the middle of our discussion, Laurie. That ability to navigate change is an important life skill, right? And it's a very important professional skill. And the more that we throw ourselves into uncomfortable situations, then the more we kind of build that muscle. So I guess that would be my parting point is, embrace discomfort and go after new challenges, and ultimately that will help to build that muscle.
Yeah, and I wonder too, like one of the things that I, really stuck with me from my days in pharma was kind of staying up with the change in the industry. So maybe the last point we'll touch on, I know Ariel's here, but how do you stay up with kind of like the changes that are happening in the pharma industry today?
I think you just have to make time for, I read everything I can. I think, I think you just have to carve out time for it. There's a lot of information, obviously, these days available, but just picking the 2 or 3 sources that are going to be bringing succinct updates, and then really spending time understanding the dynamics within the market are super important. The other thing is, of course, is just building a network, external network, and staying in tune with where investment is flowing, and where growth is happening. I mean, you can always tell if you look at where growth is happening, and where money is flowing, where investment is flowing, then that's probably where your market is moving towards.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Laurie and Michelle. That was such an awesome session. Michelle, I loved your closing sentiments on embracing discomfort. Thank you both for taking the time to step onto our stage, and I can't wait to have you guys back soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thanks.